What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic?
Why can't women become priests?
1-800-585-9396.
What's stopping?
I don't understand why I have to earn salvation.
1-800-585-9396.
What's stopping?
Why do I need to confess my sins to a priest?
What's stopping you? This is Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hi, everybody. Welcome again to Called to Communion, the program for our non-Catholic brothers and sisters, wherein we answer those questions that you have in your mind, something perhaps you heard years ago, something that you heard minutes ago from a coworker, who knows. But everybody's got questions about the Catholic faith, and we especially want to answer those from our non-Catholic brothers and sisters. So if that's you, from Buddhist to Baptist, here is your number, 1-800-585-9396, 1-800-585-9396. If you're calling from outside the U.S. and Canada, we have the international line just for you, country code 1 and then 205-271-2985. You can also send an email to ctc@ewtn.com. A-Team is in place. Rich Jesse as our producer, Matt Kabinski doing a super job on the phones, Jeff Burson doing our social media. I'm Tom Price, and along with Dr. David Anders.
Tom, how are you today?
I couldn't be better. Had a great time visiting our friends in New Jersey at Domestic Church Media. They've got 3 radio stations there, so we were able to talk with folks and remind them that Catholic radio comes at a cost, which is pretty simple. You got to pay to keep the lights on. You know?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's what that was all about, and raised a lot of money there to keep those stations on the air.
Well,
and
good.
Always enjoy going to see our friends there in New Jersey, and had some fantastic pizza.
Good for you.
You better believe it. And you just came back off the road from Kansas City. How did that go?
That's right. It was delightful, and I had a wonderful time with the Catholics of Kansas City, and I got to meet them at St. Andrew the Apostle Catholic Church, and it was a magnificent experience, and it seems to me like they're doing everything right out there.
Very cool. Well, everything's up to date in Kansas City. That's what they say. And I'm glad that was good for you. That was a Call to Communion conference, wasn't it?
I wasn't the only speaker, but that's what they called it. Yeah, they called it Call to Communion Conference, and I spoke, and there was a local deacon who spoke, Deacon John, who did a magnificent presentation on marriage, and then a priest who goes from Evansville, Indiana, who goes by the Twitter handle at Father Pontifex.
Okay.
Who apparently is a clerical rapper, among other things.
Oh, look out.
Yeah, who did a marvelous and very timely presentation. So the whole thing was excellent.
Very cool. Hey, we are live on this Monday here, the Monday of Holy Week. We will be on the air 3 days this week, and then not on Holy Thursday, I think. But definitely not on Good Friday. We'll let you know more about that a little bit later on. Our phone number again, 1-800-585-9396. I want to share 2 quick emails with everybody. First of all is one from Beth, and this is hilarious. Dear Dr. Anders, I just wanted to share this with you. I found it very amusing, thought you might enjoy it. My kids are home for spring break, and I got in the car with my 8-year-old to take her to the park. I turned on the radio to EWTN as usual, just as your program was starting. As the introduction played, this is what I heard from the back seat. Radio. Why can't women become priests? My daughter. Because men can't be nuns. Radio. Why do I have to earn salvation? My daughter. Because Jesus said so in the Bible. Radio. Why do I have to confess my sins to a priest? My daughter. So you can be forgiven. Duh. To be like a little child to enter the kingdom. Thanks for your show. God bless, Beth.
I saw that email. I laughed out loud when I read it. That's
fantastic. That is so funny. And, out of the mouths of babes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's another one. This is actually from a priest who says, Dear Dr. David, I thank you and the team for the Call to Communion program for new evangelization. I listened to your program through audio on demand. You made a comment on private revelation. As you know, there are approved apparitions of Our Lady,
That's right.
such as Our Lady of Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe. Besides, there are no errors doctrinally. Their origin is from God. And we also celebrate them in the liturgy. It is true that the public revelation is what is necessary for our human salvation. However, it is unwise not to accept God's grace given by these approved apparitions, private revelation. I would get all the help or graces I can get from God for my personal salvation and for others. God love and bless you, Father Joseph Mary, OSB, in Central Florida. What say you, David?
Well, I really appreciate the email. And, for what it's worth, in my own personal spirituality, I reflect frequently on these particular Marian apparitions, Lourdes and Fatima in particular,
Yeah.
right? And to be sure, many people have been helped tremendously by them, all right? I do think it's important to draw the distinction between public and private revelation, and I always try to emphasize that the Church doesn't insist on, we don't have divine and supernatural faith, which is appropriate for public revelation in these, and we're not required to believe them as Catholics. I think it's important to draw that distinction, but needless to say, if the Church approves of a revelation and says there's nothing that offends against the Catholic faith or morals in this, and it's allowable, the devotion is allowed, and in some cases encouraged, then it can be very helpful.
Very good. Appreciate your email there, Father Joseph, very much. It's 8 minutes after the hour. When we come back from our quick break, we'll talk with Albert, who is driving through Tennessee, Valerie in British Columbia, John in Peoria, and we've got two lines open at the moment, 1-800-585-9396. Hey, what's stopping you from becoming a Catholic yourself? This is Call to Communion on EWTN.
Sharing the fullness of the Catholic faith. 1-800-585-9396. This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Doug Keck, and welcome to EWTN's Bookmark Brief. I'm speaking here with Father William Watson, S.J. We just talked about his book, Sacred Story Rosary. And Father, you want to give us a quick update and a synopsis of what this book is about?
Sure, Doug. I started praying the Rosary about 22 years ago, 20 years into my Jesuit life. And I had never prayed it before because I didn't understand it. It was kind of a graced inspiration of the Blessed Mother to engage it. And when I started praying it, I started listening to what the mysteries actually meant. And then I started saying, well, how does this mystery apply to my own life? So when I prayed the Rosary and all the different sets of mysteries, I started thinking, Mary had done this, or Jesus did this, or St. Joseph did that, and what am I being invited to do? So it helped me stay faithful to the practice of praying the Rosary. And it also gave me a much more dynamic way of understanding what God might be asking me to do in light of the mystery. So I wanted to kind of put the wisdom down that I had gained from my 20 years of praying the Rosary into this book to hopefully help people who have prayed the Rosary their whole life and may not necessarily be getting too much out of it anymore, and also to reach people who never even considered praying the Rosary, because that was me for 35 years of my life.
Right, and it's nice because you make a connection here. An Ignatian way to pray the mysteries is the subtitle. It's Sacred Story Rosary. The author is Father William Watson, S.J., and this has been an EWTN Bookmark Brief. The book is available through the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com, and look for the interview coming soon to EWTN. Thanks.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-800-585-9396.
11 after the hour. Glad you could join us today for Call to Communion here on EWTN. Our phone number, 1-800-585-9396. Kind of busy phones for a Monday. Maybe because it's Holy Week. I don't know, but whatever. If you get a busy, do call us right back. Here is Valerie in British Columbia, listening there to EWTN Radio. Valerie, what's your question today?
Dr. Anders, my question is, I was reading the book of Revelation, chapter 17, I guess from verse 8 to, verse 8. I don't know what to make of the passage that reads, The beast that once was alive but lives no longer, it is about to come up from the abyss and will go off to be destroyed. The people living on earth whose names have not been written before the creation of the world in the book of the living will all be amazed. Who are these people? And it sort of sounds to me like predestination, but I know I've got the wrong take on it. I'm wondering if you could give an explanation of that passage.
Sure. Well, I don't know that you have the wrong take on it. And, of course, the doctrine of predestination is a biblical doctrine. It's woven throughout the New Testament in particular, in book of Ephesians, chapter 1, Romans, chapter 8. And so there's nothing offensive about the doctrine of predestination as long as it's properly understood. The particular passage that you reference, I think, is illuminated in chapter 20 of Revelation when we read about the book of life and the great white throne judgment at the end of time, and we read that men will be judged according to their deeds, whether they were good or bad, by what was recorded in the book, and those, who are righteous will inherit eternal life, and those who are not will be sent to everlasting damnation. So the same book is referenced there in Revelation chapter 20. And so there are different understandings of predestination within the Catholic tradition. At the very least, the passage that you read suggests nothing other than that God knows from all eternity who will be saved and who won't be, that God has infallible foreknowledge of the future. And that has to be because God is outside of time, and God eternally creates the temporal universe, and so he sees the end from the beginning. Now, some people, when they hear that, they think, well, does that mean that we're deprived of any free choice? We don't have any, we don't play any role in our own salvation. And that's not true, and it's not a valid inference. Here's an analogy. All right, it's just an analogy. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's an analogy to understand why God's foreknowledge doesn't compel our free action. If you think about, say, a king who's sitting up on a tower, and he's watching a parade go by in front of him, and he can see the end of the parade, down to his right, and he can see the beginning of the parade all down to his left. He can sort of take the whole thing in one permanent instant. But from the perspective of people at the bottom of the tower at street level, they just see the succession of people coming through. Well, obviously, the fact that the king can see the end from the beginning is not causing the actions of the people in the parade, right? But he can see it all in one permanent instant. That's the way that God relates to time. He can see the entire thing in one permanent instant without actually compelling our actions. He can foresee what our free actions are going to be. Now, that's very weakly, when dealing with God's foreknowledge, that's all that you would have to infer from the passage that you read, that God knows infallibly from all eternity who's going to be saved. And that's true. That's very much a biblical doctrine. But Scripture goes beyond that. It actually speaks in terms of predestination. Those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his only Son. That's in Romans chapter 8. So how then we do understand that? Okay, well, there are the basic way that the Catholic Church teaches predestination is that God will give the grace effective for salvation infallibly to those whom he knows will be saved. Right? So those who he sees from the beginning, these are the ones that are going to be in heaven. He's going to give the grace effective for salvation to those whom he knows will be saved. What the Church does not say, and what's left open for theological speculation, is on what basis does God have that foreknowledge, and for what reason does he give that grace? Is it because he foresees our free cooperation with grace, and so that he conditions the gift of grace on our free cooperation? Or does he do it for some other inscrutable reason that's beyond our ken? Right? And the Church leaves that an open question. So it teaches we need grace to be saved. We can't merit grace. Grace is given to us by God's free election. And our free cooperation with grace is absolutely necessary for salvation, so our works and our freedom are not excluded. How those things shake out, theologians have taken different perspectives at different points in Catholic history.
Sure. Valerie, thank you so much for your call. 16 after the hour. We just opened up a new line for you, 1-800-585-9396, 1-800-585-9396. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN. Let's go to Juan on Long Island, listening on TuneIn Radio to EWTN. Hey there, Juan. What's your question today?
Hi, yeah, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
My question is in regards to marriage. I've been reading Matthew 19 when the people asked Jesus about divorce. And I've been listening to Catholic radio for a long time, so I kind of have an idea pretty much of the teaching of the church, that the church doesn't grant divorce. Okay, what puzzled me a lot is on verse 9 of the chapter 19 of Matthew, where Jesus says, "And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for unchastity." It's kind of puzzled me because somehow I'm sure maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but is he saying that unless one of the spouses commits an adultery or something, that's a reason for a divorce to be granted? Or how could you help me out with this?
Okay, sure. So thank you. I appreciate the call. It's a common question. There are parallel passages in the Synoptics where Jesus does not have any sort of exception clause, and the condition is expanded in 1 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 6 or 7, I can't remember off the top of my head, where St. Paul deals with the potential problem of Christian divorce. And Paul, elaborating the Lord's command, says a wife must not divorce her husband for any reason, but if she does, let her remain unmarried. Okay? And so the way Catholic tradition has always handled this, following the teaching of sacred Scripture, is that that adultery within a valid Christian marriage does nothing to dissolve the permanent bond of marriage. All right. However, it is a grave, grave wound against the unity of the marriage, and can make conjugal living absolutely intolerable for obvious reasons. Okay, and so the Code of Canon Law allows, if a spouse commits adultery, the offended spouse can cease conjugal living, even to the extent of seeking a civil divorce if that's necessary in order to protect the spouse or the children against injury or damage or whatever, but cannot remarry while the abusing spouse is still alive, because the guilty spouse is still actually validly married to the one that was offended. So civil divorce is tolerated in that situation, but not remarriage, because canonically speaking, in the eyes of God, they're still married. All right. So that's the way it's always been handled. Now, in terms of the exegesis of Matthew 19, there are two different ways that has been handled traditionally. One of them is exactly as I just articulated, that the exception clause allows for separation but not remarriage. But there's also a good textual argument can be made that Christ here does not intend adultery. He's not allowing an exception in the case of adultery. The same word, the Greek word there for unchastity, is porneia, all right? And the same language is used in Acts chapter 15 to describe illicit marital relations due to degrees of consanguinity, like when somebody marries someone that they don't have a lawful right to marry, like their first cousin or their uncle or aunt or somebody like that. All right, and that language is used in the tradition to refer to those kinds of relationships as well. And it may be this is a textual emendation in Matthew. To allow a textual emendation, so you find the same passage articulated different places in the gospel. This is the one that has this little addition, and it may be a Matthean commentary in introducing the clause that was made church law in Acts 15. So we put that in there so that the Jews understand that the laws of consanguinity still hold for Gentile converts.
More $5 words on this program than any other show in Catholic radio.
Do I get $5 for every one?
Let me get back with you on that. Juan, thank you so much for your call. 20 minutes after the hour, this is Call to Communion on EWTN Radio. Our phone number, 1-800-585-9396. We have one line open at the moment. Let's go to Albert, who is driving through Tennessee, listening to Sirius XM 130. Albert, what's your question today?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Real quick, my daughter and her husband are really wanting to learn their faith and be able to defend it, using the Bible, and have asked me to start doing a Bible study with them once a week using Scripture, because I've been really getting into apologetics the last several years and everything, and I was just wanting a recommendation for a good basic, Bible study that, that we could do together and learn how to defend their faith. Like his family's non-Catholic and always drill them with a lot of questions. And I have like books like apologetic sets and Catholic answers and stuff like that. But they want more like where they could get homework to read certain scriptures this week and then discuss it, like on the next weekend.
Okay, I have a couple ideas for you, Albert. Thank you. I appreciate that. So first of all, I really like John Bergsma's book, Bible Study Basics for Catholics. It's a short little book. It's only maybe 120 pages long, but it gives a really good thematic overview of the Bible and shows you how the whole thing fits together. All right, that's a great introduction. I mean, and honestly, the best way to relate to the Bible is to get the big picture in your head first. Rather than just going through and trying to pull proof texts. Why do Catholics pray to saints? Well, look at these 5 verses. I mean, that's helpful. All right, but it's even more helpful if you can fit the whole biblical theology together and understand the logic of sacred Scripture. And Bergsma's book is very useful for that. He also has a sequel, I think it's called New Testament Basics for Catholics or something like that. But his 2 books are very useful. Of course, Ascension Press has a whole series of Bible study materials. I think Jeff Cavins is associated with those, are responsible for producing them. That's actually a video series, I think, but it's a lot of Catholic Bible study groups use that. That's another very helpful resource. And then Dr. Scott Hahn, has the St. Paul Center for Biblical Theology, and they actually publish a parish-level curriculum for doing exactly what you're talking about, teaching the overview of the whole Bible and the individual books of the Bible. So St. Paul Center for Biblical Theology, Jeff Cavins at Ascension Press, and John Bergsma's Bible Study Basics for Catholics all be great ways to start off on your study of the Bible.
Very good. Appreciate your call there. And our phone number here, 1-800-585-9396, 1-800-585-9396. Real quickly here at 23 after the hour, Bernardo in Trinidad and Tobago via YouTube. Hey there, Bernardo. He wants to know, can we see hints of the Trinity in the Old Testament?
Okay, that's a great question, Bernardo. I really appreciate that. Dimly. Like very dimly. All right. So there's no passage of the Old Testament that comes out and dogmatically teaches the triunity of God, and we would not know that God was a Trinity had He not revealed Himself to us in the full divinity of Jesus Christ. All right. However, the divinity of the Messiah is indicated in passages like Isaiah chapter 9. All right, and but the distinct personhood of the Spirit is a little bit dim. All right, and of course, the exact nature of Christ's filiation, how He is related filially to the Father, that's kind of only dimly hinted at in the Old Testament. The truth that God is love is clearly articulated in the Old Testament, and in Saint Augustine's mind, it is that's the clearest indication of God's triune nature, because love always has an object. All right. So can you derive the doctrine of the Trinity strictly from the Old Testament? No, you can't. But read in light of the New, does the doctrine of the Trinity illuminate our understanding of God's nature represented in the Old Testament? Absolutely.
Bernardo, thanks for checking us out today on YouTube, 25 after the hour. Let's go quickly to Stacy in Dallas, listening to EWTN on TuneIn Radio. Hey, Stacy, what's your question today?
Hi, yes. I'm currently in the RCIA process and set to become Catholic on Saturday.
Okay.
At the Easter Vigil. I'm having a little bit of a struggle because the priest in our parish has been teaching people to use birth control, and we just had our marriage validated this past week, and the section of the ceremony that asks if you're willing to accept children from God and raise them in the faith, he completely skipped over and said we already have 3 children, so that wasn't necessary. I guess I'm just feeling very, I'm not sure I guess I'm having doubts if I should stop the process and wait till next year somewhere else. I just feel like, is everything valid?
Okay, wow.
Yes.
Thank
Stacy,
you.
First of all, hang in there with us because we're about to come up on a break here that we have to take. So if we don't get that answered, then we will on the other side.
This is a wonderful question, and I want to deal with it adequately. While I'm talking to you, I'm pulling up a passage in the Catechism so I know that I quote the right thing. Okay, yeah, if you look at paragraph 2370 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the Church's teaching on artificial contraception is very clearly represented, as it is as well in papal encyclicals. encyclicals like Humana Vitae and Casti Connubiis. So there's no doubt about the teaching of the church. So what do you do when the pastor of your church is not supportive of church teaching? We're going to come back to that after the break.
Don't go away, Stacy. We'll also talk with Art, Maria, and Jan. Busy phones on this Holy Week Monday here on EWTN's Call to Communion. Stay with us.
Hey, Catholic high school and college filmmakers, want to get your work seen in over 250 million homes around the world? Then enter the Cool to be Catholic commercial contest. We're looking for original 30 and 60-second spots that focus on Catholic themes. 3 grand prize winners will get an all-expense-paid trip to the EWTN studios in Birmingham, Alabama, and a guest appearance on Life on the Rock. To find out more and to enter, go to EWTN.com/cool2becatholic.
From the archives, this is the wisdom of Mother Angelica.
You and I must be imitators of Jesus. We are victims sometimes of circumstances, as he was here. But it was all accepted as the Father's holy will. That is holiness. So try to pray. How much time do you spend watching soap operas or television that really isn't good television? See, well, I need to relax. I find prayer very relaxing. You can kick your shoes off and just sit there and talk to the Lord. He's your friend. You don't have to be on your dignity. There's many times during the day you can pray. In your car, when you're picking up the kids, on your way to the office. Let us be Jesus-oriented. He loves you.
For more about Mother Angelica, visit EWTNRC.com.
Something amazing is happening on EWTN. One wildly dynamic speaker and a team of young missionaries are on a cross-country road trip, spreading their message of hope in Christ. Their passion is awakening youth to the power of God's love. It's energetic, honest, affirming, like nothing you've seen on TV before. You're Amazing with Justin Fatika. Thursdays at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Global Catholic Network, EWTN.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-800-585-9396.
Before we go back to the phones here, talking with Stacy in Dallas, I want to let you know about this wonderful new book that's just out, A Holy Year in Rome, the complete Pilgrim's Guide for the Year of Mercy by our own Rome Bureau Chief Joan Lewis. It is the definitive guide to the Jubilee of Mercy. This great new book takes you back in time for a look at the history of Jubilees and then brings you to the present with a visit to the 7 pilgrim basilicas of Rome and the immeasurable treasures of Rome and the Vatican. Joan has outdone herself. This is a great new book, and it's now available at EWTNRC.com, EWTNRC.com. So whether you're going to Rome for this holy year, this year of mercy, or if you're not going to Rome, in either case, it's going to be a great book just for you from Joan Lewis. Go to EWTNRC.com. So, before the break, we were talking with Stacy in Dallas. She's in the RCIA program. She is set to come into the church on Saturday during the Easter Vigil, but she's a little concerned about her instructor, possibly even the parish priest.
Sure. So first of all, the issue was the church's teaching on the procreative ends of human marriage.
Yeah.
Right? And I just want to reiterate the church's teaching on this, and I'm reading from paragraph 2366 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The Church, which is on the side of life, teaches that it is necessary that each and every marital act remain ordered per se to the procreation of human life, and it goes on to explain how that is completely incompatible with the use of contraception. Now, to shore that up and let you know that this isn't just a matter of opinion, it's not something controverted that you can take or leave if you want to. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, in its commentary on the Profession of Faith, says, the second proposition for the profession states, I also firmly accept and hold each and everything definitively proposed by the Church regarding teaching on faith and morals, all those teachings belonging to the dogmatic or moral area which are necessary for faithfully keeping and expounding the deposit of faith, even if they have not been proposed by the magisterium as formally revealed. All right, now, I believe the magisterium has propounded this as formally revealed, but the congregation says even a doctrine that's not been proposed as formally revealed, if it's part of the deposit of faith and the heritage of Catholic tradition has been taught as belonging to the necessary moral sphere for living out the faith, it is necessary to affirm this and hold this firmly as part of the Catholic deposit of faith. All right, so it's taught by the Church, and the Church goes out of its way to emphasize, not only do we teach it, but you got to believe it.
Settled.
All right, settled. Period. End of paragraph. No dispute, no debate. All right. So, if a person obstinately rejects, denies some article of Catholic faith, that's called the sin of heresy. If somebody refuses to assent to it, that's the sin of incredulity. Paragraph 2088 of the Catechism lays out the sins that we can commit against the faith. So we're obligated to believe it, and it's a sin if we don't believe it. All right, so I just want to get that out there. All right, why? Well, the very purpose of Christian marriage, the purpose of all marriage, is the bond of one man, one woman, in an indissoluble, lifelong union for the sake of raising a family.
Yeah.
All right, and so the unitive and procreative ends of marriage are intimately connected. We're united as husband and wife, as parents. We're not just united as tennis players. Right, we're united as parents. All right, so those things have to be kept together always. Now, what do you do if you run into a church situation where you have a leader in your church, even a priest, that is teaching against some aspect of Catholic faith or practice? Well, unfortunately, this is something that's happened since day one of the church.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
It has never been the case that every single Catholic in the world has always consciously, explicitly, and obediently assented to everything revealed. All right. In fact, when Christ gave out the teaching on the indissolubility of Christian marriage, his own disciples said, "God, you got to be kidding." Nobody really believes that, do they? That's what his own disciples said in Matthew 19. Yeah. And of course, Judas dissented in a incredibly grave way. He said, I fundamentally reject the nature of the messiahship that you propose, so much so that I'm going to undermine it to your death. All right, and so Judas, damned himself in doing that.
Yeah.
So it is possible for a Catholic cleric, a Catholic layperson, any Catholic, to dissent from some aspect of the unity of the faith. Is the unity of the faith thereby mortally wounded? And the answer is no. All right? Because we know what the objective teaching of the Church is, and the unity of the faith consists in our adherence to that faith once for all delivered to the saints and faithfully handed on to by the magisterium. So if you are the only person in your parish who fully assents to the teaching of the Catholic faith, if you're the only one, then you have just joined yourself fully to the unity of the Catholic Church. And fortunately, the efficacy of the sacraments and the fruitfulness of your participation in them is not dependent on the moral worthiness of the priest administering them, but on God's divine promise in Jesus Christ that the gates of hell would never prevail against the Church. And at the end of the day, the only thing that you need to worry about is, for your own self, is, am I being 100% obedient to God? All right. And if he has revealed the Catholic faith in all its fullness and glory and beauty for my salvation, because he intends to me my own good, if somebody else wants to cut off their own nose to spite their face and live a wounded moral life, to some extent wounded, all right, that's not your concern. Your concern is your own life of holiness, all right? And at some point down the road, you may even have an opportunity to speak in that person's life and win them back to the truth.
So she should...
Get Catholic.
Get Catholic.
And then maybe change parishes.
Well, yeah. Stacy, is that helpful for you?
Yes, thank you so much. That's a relief.
Great.
We'll be praying for you, Stacy. Congratulations. 36 after the hour. You're listening to Call to Communion here on EWTN. Got one line open for you, 1-800-585-9396. Let's go to Art in Jacksonville, Florida, listening to EWTN on Queen of Peace Radio. Art, what's your question today?
Yes, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
How would you articulate the determining principle in which the government should use to determine or limit religious freedoms? Like, we do not allow an Aztec priest to offer human sacrifice, but they're trying to get the Sisters of Charity or Mercy to pay for the mandate, the healthcare mandate. How would a just government, what should they use?
Sure,
I've never been able to articulate it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, so St. Thomas tells us that law is an ordinance of reason for the common good. Law is an ordinance of reason for the common good. And so the rule of civil law is the rule of reason informed by the first principles of natural law. All right. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1960s, and 63, when he preached the I Have a Dream speech.
I think that was 63, I'll find out.
And when he wrote the letter from the Birmingham jail, he said, an unjust law is no law at all, and a just law is one that conforms to the eternal law, the law of God, the natural law, that's knowable by human reason, deriving from the dignity of the human person and, God's existence and things like this. And he cites Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine, Catholic saints, in defense of that doctrine. King was no Catholic, but he was being pretty darn Catholic then, all right, in that appeal to natural law. And so that's the limit. That's the limit of toleration of religious freedom. That the reason the government needs to have religious freedom built into the very fabric of its legal system is because the ability. What makes us human is our rationality and our freedom and our capacity for transcendence. All right, and our religious nature is fulfilled ultimately in our freely deciding to follow the truth and to follow conscience. All right, and so a law that deliberately restricts that wounds and is grossly destructive of the thing that makes us most sublime, most human, that allows us to transcend our merely animal nature. Right? Obviously, the limit you put on that is gross superstition, and particularly superstition that would do grave harm to another human being. So if my religious practice tells me to go kill my neighbor, that's not in accord with natural law or human reason or the good of the human person or the good of the human community. And so it's the rule of reason and the common good that is the limit of good and just law.
Art, thank you so much for your call. 39 after the hour, and by the way, both documents, both speeches really, both documents or speeches, were in 1963.
63, that's just
yeah, April of 63 for the letter from the Birmingham jail, and August of 63, his incredible I Have a Dream speech.
63 was the speech. 64, he got the Nobel Peace Prize. 65, the council published Gaudium et Spes, and my opinion is that they did so in full knowledge and awareness and sensitivity to the civil rights movement in the United States. And then I think it was 68 he was assassinated.
Yes,
right?
that is correct.
It's also the year that Pope Paul VI promulgated Humana Vitae.
It's amazing how all this is intertwined, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It really is. 39.
And I got married on the anniversary of Humana Vitae.
Good man.
Not on purpose.
It just turned out that way.
It turned out that way. Yeah.
Okay. 39, almost 40 after the hour. Let's take one more quick break. When we come back, we'll talk with Maria in Santa Barbara, California, Anthony in Nevada, Lucas in Washington, D.C., all coming up here on Call to Communion on EWTN.
Sharing the fullness of the Catholic faith. 1-800-585-9396. This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
60 Seconds with Father Mitch Pacwa.
You can only say that you're saved in Christ and that you act in cooperation with Him. That's the only way you can do it. And God's plan has ordained that the efficacy of the exercise of the ministry is also conditioned by greater or lesser human receptivity and participation. Now let me go through that. The way that God set things up is that how efficacious, how well the sacraments work, if you will, and how well we cooperate with them depends on how much more we receive or how much less we receive. Are we receptive or are we closed-minded? I can pour a bucket of water over your head, but if your mouth isn't open, you're not going to get a drink. Same thing here. If your mind and heart are not open to Jesus, I can pour infinite amounts of grace all over you, but you're not going to receive a saving grace. That's what's key here.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
This is Doug Keck, EWTN President and Chief Operating Officer.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley of Oklahoma City.
Hi, this is Patrick Coffin, host of Catholic Answers Live. Have a blessed Lent from all of us at EWTN Radio.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-800-585-9396.
Monday of Holy Week. That is where we are here in the liturgical calendar. We are so glad that you have made us a part of your Holy Week listening. By the way, tomorrow night on Mother Angelica Live Classics, Mother talks about the Stations of the Cross. Couldn't get more important than that. Check it out tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN television. Let's go now to Maria in Santa Barbara, California, listening online, EWTN.com. Maria, what's your question today? Maria in Santa Barbara, are you there?
Maria, Santa Barbara.
Maria? Let's put Maria on hold if we could, Rich. Let's go now to Anthony in Nevada, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM 130. Anthony, what's your question today?
Yes, sir. I heard a woman ask, why aren't you a Catholic?
Yeah.
And I have a couple of reasons, but to get to where it started was when I was a child, I was very misbehaved child, and I got in trouble at CCD, and they kicked me out of school. And I haven't pursued Catholicism ever since, and I've been on a very lonely faith walk ever since, too. So...
Well, Anthony, I'm so sorry for that experience, and I could understand feeling alienated, by having that experience. I mean, I know when I was a kid, I was a pretty rambunctious, loudmouth, know-it-all,
really
smart-alecky kind of kid.
Wow!
And I went to a school that allowed corporal punishment, and I'm not just saying this to be kind of snarky. I genuinely believe that I had several teachers that took kind of a malicious pleasure in beating me, and I got beat a lot, and I got beat more than other kids, and I got bitter about it for a long time, and to this day, if I go back and reflect on it, I mean, sometimes it was, was it even abusive? I don't know, but I can get kind of if I think about it too much, and these were Presbyterians, all right. Do I hold Presbyterianism responsible for that? No, I don't hold Presbyterianism responsible for it. I don't even hold the particular church congregation where that school was attached responsible. To the extent there was culpability, I would hold the particular individuals involved responsible. And, with respect to the Catholic Church clearly pretty upfront about the nature of God as love. And Pope Francis just recently published a document for the Year of Mercy in which he said the paradigm case of mercy is pardoning offenses, and that includes both impatient teachers that should pardon rambunctious 10-year-olds, and it counts to me too. 45-year-old men that should go back into their past and pardon those that were maybe unfair to him. All right, and if that's the one thing that's keeping you from becoming Catholic, then, I would invite you to give it another shot. And maybe you can redeem that experience. If you come back into the church, you could end up being that CCD teacher who has learned patience with rambunctious 10-year-olds. And you could be that welcoming person that makes a difference in a child's life forever.
Anthony, the door is open for you, and we will keep you in prayer as well. Thank you for your call. 45 after, let's go to Maria in Santa Barbara, and hopefully Maria is with us at this time. Are you there now, Maria?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go right ahead. Sure, go. That's quite all right. Go right ahead.
Yes, well, my question is this. My kids, one of my oldest daughter, she's 14 actually, she came and I didn't know how to answer exactly this. She said that on her youth group, they told her that Adam and Eve didn't actually exist. I mean, of course, the theory of creation it's the right one, but then I couldn't explain to her how does the theory of creation and evolution coincide, they kind of reconcile with each other, and it's also it's okay with the Catholic Church.
Sure, yeah.
And then what other characters of the Bible didn't exist that we just kind of know that that's how it happened, but it didn't actually exist. So it's kind of hard for her not to start not thinking, okay, so which ones are real and which ones are not.
Yeah, it's a great question, Maria. I really appreciate it. Okay, so fortunately, the Church has spoken to this issue very directly. Pope Pius XII wrote an encyclical on it. The name of the encyclical was Humani Generis. And what the Pope said was that Catholics have to believe that God infused the immortal soul, the immaterial and immortal soul, into a single human couple, all right, from whom the entire human race is presently descended, all right. And not so much because of the Genesis account, which includes elements that seem to be obviously figurative and theological in character. Genesis is not there to give us a detailed historical anthropology, or a treatise on geology or ancient history or something like that. That's not the purpose of the text. The purpose of the text is to help us understand the nature of our relationship to God. And if you follow the narrative in Genesis, one of the most interesting insights you gain is that the process of creation seems to follow a pattern where God goes from creatures that have less self-determination to creatures that have more self-determination, arriving ultimately at the creation of mankind, the creature that has the highest degree in all of the material world, the highest degree of self-determination, because he's created in the image and likeness of God and is able to know and to frame and choose his acts, all right? And that's put on display, ultimately when he actually has the opportunity to choose the experiential knowledge of evil. That's, what the tree is there figuring. I mean, we pick between framing our lives in accord with goodness as defined by God, or, no, I don't want to go that way. I want to actually have experiential knowledge of evil, and that's what Adam and Eve chose, right? So that's very illuminating in terms of, why then this tragedy of human experience and pain and suffering and warfare and, lust and all this kind of thing? Well, it's because of our first parents chose experiential knowledge of evil over relationship with God. Right? But did they really exist as an historical couple? Yes. The Church says, yes, they did. Yes, they did. Have to believe that because our whole salvation is framed around this dichotomy between being lost in Adam and being saved in Christ. We're saved because we're incorporated into Jesus. We were born without the gift of sanctifying grace because we're born in Adam. We're reborn in Christ. Now, does that mean that all of the fine details of the Genesis narrative, play out in history exactly as they're written? So that was Eden, located right there between the Tigris and Euphrates River, and in modern day Iraq? On that, the Church leaves the question to honestly a little bit undefined. So there's room for differences of opinion. A Catholic is not bound to believe in the doctrine of Darwinian evolution. If I know plenty of Catholics that don't believe that, believe in a much more strictly literal understanding of the Bible, and that's perfectly allowed, and that's probably the dominant view going back for 2,000 years. There are other Catholics that say, no, I think we can probably reconcile the Genesis narrative with modern evolutionary and anthropological accounts without doing any damage to the core of our faith. And that's also allowed, all right? That's one of the great things about Catholic faith. The Church comes down and says, here's what you have to believe, and here's the area where you can kind of let your creative speculation run free, and theologians can go to work and try to render the mystery intelligible, all right? Allowable, theological opinions that differ, as long as you hold these elements right here that we define as essential.
Very cool. Maria, thank you for your call. 50 after the hour. Let's go to Lucas in Washington, D.C., listening to EWTN on Guadalupe Radio. Hey there, Lucas. What's your question today?
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering, if you were a fake priest, what would the parish, would they be receiving the sacraments?
Good question. Good question. The answer is no. If you were not a validly ordained priest, all right, you could not actually confect Christ's presence in the Eucharist, and you could not validly forgive sins, for instance, okay? Nor could you validly confirm, and you couldn't validly give last rites, or all this kind of thing. So you wouldn't actually be giving out the real sacraments. So what then about the condition of a layperson if for some crazy reason they happen to find themselves in a church where there was a fake priest who snuck in and didn't have wasn't ordained and didn't have faculties.
Yeah.
And this doesn't happen very often. I mean, you don't need to worry about it. It doesn't happen very often. But it has from time to time happened, once or twice in history.
Mm-hmm.
Are you lost then? Well, no, because God knows the guy isn't a real priest. All right. And we don't have any objective promise that God will attach grace to the celebration of these invalid ceremonies. But he also knows that you're completely ignorant and guiltless in this.
Yes.
So God can step in and give grace even apart from the sacraments, if he wants to.
He's
All right?
God.
But it's still important that we have validly ordained priests that have lawful faculties, because then the lay people know with certainty, they're not just conjecturing, not just betting on God's mercy.
Mm-hmm.
They know with certainty that Christ is present there because he attached his promise to those sacraments.
Appreciate your call, Lucas. 52 after. Let's go to Eileen in Bristol, Indiana, listening to EWTN on Redeemer Radio. Hey there, Eileen. What's your question today?
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
I have a great disturbance. I live in Bristol, Indiana, very close to a Catholic university, Notre Dame. And what do we do as practicing Catholics and in this special time of evangelization when the Catholic University, Notre Dame, previously gave President Obama an award in opposition of Bishop Darcy, God bless his soul, and then now, and it caused great scandal, and now Notre Dame is going to give the Lotari Award to Vice President Biden in opposition of Bishop Rhodes. It's kind of like putting their finger in his eye, and in our brethren who we're trying to evangelize say, your university professes a faith that says, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. I'm going to jump in. Eileen, I'm going to jump in because we're almost out of time. David?
Well, yeah, a couple things we can do. First of all, you can send your children to Orthodox Catholic colleges and universities that follow Ex Corde Ecclesia, John Paul's instructions on how Catholic universities are to be run.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and you can, of course, write letters to the board members and the administration of these universities that are not living in accord with the church teachings. William Blatty, who is the author of The Exorcist and a graduate of Georgetown University, I think he even initiated a canon law suit against Georgetown to try to force them to come back in line with church teaching.
Wow.
But at the very least, I wouldn't patronize these universities that flaunt church teaching. And I would point out, even the Bishop of South Bend, as I understand, has publicly expressed his dismay.
That's what she was saying.
Over Notre Dame's activities. And so you can say to your friends and relatives, look, the church doesn't approve this. The church is outwardly condemning it. But the governmental structure and the board structure of the university is more or less independent of the church.
Yeah.
So, we don't have any legal recourse against them.
Eileen, thank you so much for your call. Keep praying as well. David, thank you so much, my friend.
Well, thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Great to be back here in the air chair, along with Rich, Matt, and Jeff, who make the show happen almost as much as you do. Please join us again tomorrow for Tuesday of Holy Week, when we'll do it again right here on EWTN Radio's Call